When you're getting started with CMMC, the first thing you need to do is identify the data and information that's subject to the CMMC security requirements. All right, so the goal of this is to isolate system components based on the data flow. So we identify the controlled information, then we map the data flow, and then align that to all the components that support or move around that data that we've identified. So I have 3 simple things to share with you today that will help you identify this information and help you scope your system. All right, so for those of you that don't know me, I'm Andrew Chandler, and I've been working with NIST cybersecurity compliance for the better part of a decade. I've helped both federal and state governments with their system security compliance and assessments, so both sides. And so what I do today, or what I like to do now, is like to help people get a little bit better at this whole cyber thing so we can protect our data and our information. All right, cool. But first, before we go over what we're going to cover, cheers. Nice. All right, so we're going to cover 2 simple processes, a high-level and high-level scoping guidance. And what we're going to cover is we're going to cover the CUI and FCI identification, that's controlled unclassified information, and federal contract information. We're going to walk through a simple process to identify that. Then we'll start defining a data flow, and I'll touch through some simple scoping guidance, and I'll walk through a quick, real high-level data flow diagram that will help you kind of explain what it is that I'm walking through with these processes. But first, cheers. All right, so we're going to flip over to my computer real quick. So I got 4 little things right here. We're going to go ahead and walk through that. All right, so first up is a CUI FCI identification process. So we'll zoom in on it and kind of walk through these quick questions. So one sec, bear with me. I'll zoom in a little more. All right, cool. So first question for this information and data identification process. Is the information publicly available? So yes or no. So yes, if this information is publicly available, it's not CUI, it's not FCI, and these security requirements do not apply. If no, then we'll move on to the next question. So by publicly available, what this means is this available on a .gov website that anybody could go to? So somebody can go to and it's freely accessible by the government. Any user, U.S. citizen, could create an account and access this information. So that would be like publicly available, not something that your organization made publicly available that may be subject to CUI or any kind of like controlled information handling. All right, so that's first question. Next up, we have, one sec, go ahead and move this down. Okay, does this information come from the government or was it created for a federal contract? So what we mean by this is, as you are awarded your contract or whatever, any contracts that you're working right now for the government, when you look through your contracts and the information that you receive from the government, are there any portion markings? So it'd be like CUI, those are marked typically in the header and the footer. And there's also a title page that describes what the classification of the information within the document is, as well as any distribution requirements or safe handling requirements. So you want to look through that. So anything that you've gotten from the government, walk through all that. If it's a document, of course it will have the title page. If it's data, work with your contract officer representative or the contract officer to determine what the classification of that information, what it is basically. And then the second part to this question is, was it created for a federal contract? So not always will you get or receive information from the government. Sometimes you're producing something that would be later classified as controlled and classified information upon delivery. So that's what this next question is about. So walk through this, and if it's no, if both of these, the answer to both these questions are no, highly likely that it's not CUI or FCI. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question. So let me go ahead and scroll down a little bit. Okay, so does this information require protection under federal law, regulation, or policy? Okay, so this is super important. If it does not require all of these things, so we've gone through the first 2 questions. If they're both yes, and then we get here and there's no special protections required by law, regulation, or policy, then high likelihood it's FCI. And cool. You can mark it as FCI, or you could categorize all of that information as SCI and then apply the appropriate CMMC controls to that information. And that's how we would use that to scope our system in the next process. All right, so if yes, we'll scroll down, then it's likely to be CUI. So yes, you'll still need confirmation. Even though I'm walking through all of this and it's like, yeah, it's likely. There are times where something could be subject to these kinds of things. Would be yes to all of these, and may fall out, but it's likely CUI. But you would take this information, identify it all, then you would reach back out to your core or to that contract officer representative or the contract officer and just confirm. Main thing we want to do is confirm. We can build a system, but we want to build the system to the data that we have. So we've identified something that wasn't marked or has no portion markings. We could take it back to the government and ask them to confirm whether or not this information is CUI or if we should treat it as FCI, which is significantly less security requirements to meet. Okay, cool. So once we've determined, hey, it's likely CUI, we need to determine what kind of CUI it is. So this is like bonus stuff for this. I'll zoom in a little bit and I could share this. So the archives.gov, this is a good place. It's where the CUI registry is. It kind of describes what kind of CUI or what flavor basically of CUI we have here. So I just picked a couple. So I have defense, critical infrastructure, and export control. Excuse me. And these are a few of the items that are within. So I can move this out of the way so you can see what else I wrote. So these are subcategories within these categories of CUI. So there's also like PII and PHI are going to be covered in here. But another note that I have here, so if you're still not sure, or you haven't reached out to the government yet to confirm all this stuff, you want to look in your contracts for these clauses or these kinds of terms. I think it's really important to look at. So DFARS 252.204-7012. So if you have this clause in there, it's a CUI. It's basically a CUI clause. It says, you have CUI, you need to do all these things to make sure that you're protecting this information correctly. Any technical data clause with export controls, that kind of falls right here under export controlled and export controlled research. So that's likely to be CUI. And then we have FCI. So this is our FCI clause. So pretty much just about every contract will have this clause in it. But if you're concerned about whether or not it's CUI, if you have that or you're likely to receive it, just check your contract for this clause, and that'll kind of send you on the right way, or at least give you a higher probability of your determination that a lot of this information that you're receiving is CUI and should be treated as such. Okay. So that's process number one. That's what I use to walk through what CMMC is and this identification of this CUI FCI process. So cool. All right, moving on to the next process. Okay, so defining the data flow. All right, this one's really important. So once we've identified the data, so first step, we wanted to identify what information they have that we need to control and we need to map throughout our system. Where is it going? How are we using it? And da-da-da-da-da. So, okay, so we want to figure that stuff out. So next one, I'll just move this whole thing over here to the side, and we'll kind of just walk through this. Okay, so this one is defining the data flow. This is what I use and try to use to help people understand what it is that we're trying to do and what these things mean. So first up, we want to look at entry points. So where are the entry points? So where does CUI or FCI enter the environment? We've identified the kinds of CUI or FCI that we're receiving, or likely to produce as part of the contract. But now we need to figure out where does it go and how do we get it? Where does this stuff occur? Or where is it stored, So we want to look at our entry points. So first question here, I'll zoom in a little bit so you guys can see this, is where does the CUI or FCI enter your environment? So are we getting it physical media? So are we getting either mailed documents or is it on a disk, some kind of CD or something like that? Are you getting it over email, sending, receiving? So you could be working with a government customer and they're emailing you documents, or is it through a file share? So sometimes they'll use a file share where the information is produced and hosted on the file share, and then a user is given certain credentials, and they're able to pull that information down. So that's how we're pulling it into the environment. So we want to map the entry point, and this is not all inclusive. These are just some of the most common ways that I've seen information move or enter or go from the government into your system. All right, so we want to map that first. How does it go in? Next up, we have transmit, process, storage. So sometimes you'll see this as an acronym. Sometimes you'll see it as like T/P/S or some other derivative of the same thing. But that's basically what this is. So the second step is, where does the data go? So once it's in the system, what does it touch? So we're going to look at any servers or application servers that this information may go. We want to map all the network paths. So is it going through a firewall, and then from the firewall to the router, and then from the router it goes to this network segment, and then what else is in this network segment from the servers, from all the things, all your network equipment in there. And then we also want to make sure that we're considering our backup and storage locations. So yes, while it may be processed and stored and regularly used in a typical local server or in some kind of cloud server, you want to look up where their backup locations are, because you'll need to define that, and you're likely going to get asked that question when you go through your assessments. And then last, so exit points. So how does it leave the environment? So where does the CUI FCI exit the environment? So this is very much like your entry points, because you're likely to use the same means to move this data back and forth. Are you doing it physically? So are you printing it? You're printing and shipping. You're shipping it first class, and all the other safeguards that are required for that. Are you emailing this information back and forth and doing the same type of safeguards, or are you putting it back in the file share? Some way or another, you'll be delivering something back to the government. Is the main assumption here, and it's likely to follow the same path that it entered the environment. So this is how you start mapping out your data flow, definitely taking all this stuff into consideration. And then I'll move this cool little guy, my little box over here, and then this last one. So this is just some quick scoping guidance. I like to keep it around just in case. It really just helps me focus. So what are we looking at when we're doing this? So we have in-scope stuff and out-of-scope stuff. And in-scope stuff is, by stuff, I mean they're in-scope to a CMMC assessment. So what is this? There's any asset that stores, processes, or transmits CUI FCI, as well as any asset that connects to a CUI or FCI system. This includes your CRMA or contract or risk managed assets. Those are going to be included in this bubble. So just make sure there are 5 asset classes, but really 4 asset classes, because out of scope is an asset class for whatever reason. So you just want to make sure as you're doing these data flows, you're definitely considering all of these things, and it's typically the CRMAs are important to keep in mind, because they may not be directly connected, but you may use a laptop or desktop as maybe a CRMA if it's a VDI or that virtual desktop interface, and that's literally your interface to access whatever kind of environment that CUI information is in or lives in. And then out of scope, it's pretty self-explanatory. It has no connection, no relation to anything CUI FCI, and is isolated and segmented. If you're familiar with PCI and that kind of network segmentation, that's really the goal that you want to go to. All your CUI or the CM information and system components that are subject to CMMC, isolate them in their own segment. That way, all that your scope is small. The goal is to make the scope very, very little. The more stuff you add in, and the more confusion you make, the more people look, and the more they get confused, and the more questions they ask. So the goal is to get everybody what they want, when they want it, and in a manner that they understand. Okay, cool. So last up, I made this cool little table. It's like a high-level data flow diagram that the goal is for it to show you what it is that we just walked through with that process. Yes, it could be significantly more detailed, but for the I guess the intent of this video and what we're trying to show, I think it's good enough. All right, so here it is. This is your company CMMC system. So we got this dash line, and this is where all of your magic happens. Your magic happens in here, because if you didn't have magic, you likely wouldn't have a government contract. So this is where your magic happens, and this is where you protect their data. Okay, so just like we talked about before, so let me zoom in a little bit, and let's talk about this stuff. So our external controlled information. So this is exactly what we were talking about earlier. Okay, so how is this information entering our environment? Not every system is going to have this controlled information enter, but it's always going to exit. So this is just a quick little table to say these are just some high-level examples of controlled information. So we have files and disks. Files also meaning paper documents, because you need to protect paper documents as well. And so I marked this all up as a physical assets. So these physical assets will follow this kind of data path, although whatever kind of medium is used to transport this physical media goes through this red dash line. Super important. So this is our boundary. If you're familiar with typical government RMF or risk management framework and ATOs or authorities to operate, typically you want to scope your system, and that's what this red boundary is. So all the CMMC stuff is gonna be within this boundary. As you're drawing up your data flows or your system diagrams, I think this is a very important thing to do, because most assessors seem to come from a similar background of like either federal government or state government kind of work around this kind of assessments. So they'll be very familiar with a red dash line. This is our boundary. But anyway, that's just GWIS information. So as this physical media stuff comes in, it's likely to go in some kind of secure or controlled area within your company. And if you're getting disks, you should scan them. This is the good thing to do. You should scan them to make sure the disks are clean. They don't have anything nefarious on there. Unlikely, but you always want to do it. So make sure you check that box and you protect yourself from any potentials. And then also like physical media storage. So be some kind of controlled storage cabinet within this controlled area of your business or company. Okay, so that's physical media. This dash line comes down here. Because if you're going to convert those physical media or use that physical media in order to create your magic that you do, and that's why the government wanted you to do stuff for them. If you need it for your magic, that's what this line's for. You would pass that CUI. So typically, purple means CUI. Sometimes not, but I believe on archives.gov it says purple is CUI. So whatever. Anyway, so that's what this purple line is. So this would be this CUI information moving from a physical standpoint to user and their user workstation that's within scope for CMMC. Okay, moving on. Then we have file shares. So we're back on our external controlled information. So we have file shares. We have email. So this would be digital media that will be moved over, that will pass over through a firewall, and then it'll hit your router and your network equipment and stuff like that. I didn't break all those assets out because it takes a long time to make look super nice, but essentially this is pretty much the flow that we're going to get to. So from there, it can go to your user workstations or wherever that information is supposed to go. It will follow all the right paths to get to where it needs to your servers, databases, and your storage, whatever. And as well as backups. So this is where all of your magic happens. Your CMMC is where your CMMC system environment is where all of your magic happens. Super cool stuff. And yeah, so pretty much a couple of things we covered today were two processes. So the two processes were some kind of your data and information identification process is basically what it is. So we covered that process, the CUI FCI identification process. Then we'd walk through just a simple diagram walking through how do we do system scoping and what should be in scope and what are considerations when we're defining the data flow. And then we touched again one more time on what is considered in scope for CMMC and what is out of scope. So we touch all the asset classes again, and then walk through just my quick down and dirty diagram about CMMC and how kind of information moves around. All right, so if you'd like to support the channel and learn some more cyber stuff, definitely comment, help me out. I'm trying to make something useful for the community. There's lots of cyber people out there that are super good at things, and lots of new cyber people. So I want to help elevate the whole community of all the cyber nerds and get us really good at this whole thing, not just CMMC, but cyber in general. I typically focus on governance, risk, and compliance. Not too good at all the super nerd kid tools, such as like Red Hat, Red Team stuff. Not too good at that. But as far as administrative and governance, risk, compliance things, pretty good. And yeah, so if you want to continue to see more, definitely comment below. Any of your thoughts, feedbacks, and things like that. And if you'd like to support the channel, definitely do so. Please like, subscribe, do all the things that everybody else does to do. And then we'll see you next time. Cheers.